Today we're going to be looking at my most epic competition of my career. It was a battle between myself and Owen Boxall in the 94 kilo class at the British Championships. We were fighting out for a qualification spot for the 2016 Olympic Games, and it was one hell of a battle. We're going to start off by running and watching through this competition together. I'm going to be stopping at some points to talk to you about some key factors that made this competition so epic, and then there'll be a technique analysis at the end of this video so you can get an understanding of where we went wrong and right. So we're going to start off having a look at Owen Boxall's first lift. He opened at 148 kilo snatch. Now on his first lift he actually missed, which was really rare for Owen because Owen was notoriously way better than me in snatch in this competition. And my mindset going into this particular event was that if I could get ahead of him or at least stay with him into the clean and jerk, I'd have a pretty good chance of taking the win. So he opened with a miss, which was pretty rare. I then came out in the same weight, 148. Now this was about 6 kilos off what I'd done in training in the lead up to this competition. My energy going into this event was so high, just purely on the basis that my training in the lead up to it had gone so well. And I also had some unfinished business from missing out in the 2012 Olympic Games, so I wanted to make sure that this one I was going to nail. Owen then came back out on the same weight, 148, to tie me, but he actually ended up missing it again. He went then for his final lift at 150 kilos, so after 2 misses, he went up to 150 to get ahead of me by 2 kilos because he had me on body weight by a very small amount, which in a weightlifting competition, if you both hit the same weight but someone's slightly lighter, they're winning. So he comes out then on 150 to go ahead of me. Absolutely epic snatch, held onto it at the back, stood up, brilliant. But that's Owen out of lifts. I then moved up to 152 to tie what was my lifetime best in training. The 152 went out the back. We're going to dive into that a little bit later. So I had 1 lift left remaining now to get ahead on the snatch, and I ended up sticking it. So going into the clean and jerk now, had a couple of kilo lead, which was unheard of for me. Now, Owen opened then on 174 clean and jerk, and 179 clean and jerk to get one in. Now this was a fairly big lift for him because I'd only seen him prior to this competition hit around a 180, so I knew he was on his upper limit. I went to 185 on my opening lift and made it, and at that point now being 7 kilos ahead of him, I thought there's no way he could get back in front. So, see what happens. He then moves up to 188, which was then putting him back in the tie with me, but not ahead of me at this point. This was for him at the time around an 8 kilo PB that he had made. The next lift then for me to again stay ahead on body weight, 1 per kilo ahead, was to hit 190 kilos. Now this tied around what I had done in competition prior, and at this point, I'm really chuffed. I thought that was enough to win the competition, so much so that I knew that the likelihood of coming out and hitting another lift was small. But look what happens. Owen comes out and hits 193, 13 kilos more than what I'd seen him hit in competition. Now, at this point, I was in the back room just chilling, thinking, oh, everything's over, there's no way he would have made the lift. My coach comes running up to me, he's like, Sonny, you need to go out and make 1 more lift if you're gonna win this competition. Now, 193 was the British record. Now, I wanted to go 194 to try and beat the British record. Now, my coach hated this because I didn't need to do 194 to win. 193 was enough. But in my mind, I was going to be more G'd up if I went for the 194 and broke the British record. So this is how it unfolded. Missed the bounce and the catch of the clean. Stood up here, and at this point, right before I went for this jerk, I felt a little bit sick come up in my mouth. The only thing that was stopping me being sick at this point was the fact that the bar was bearing down on my neck. I sent the jerk, and it was almost like at that given moment, I blacked out, and the next thing I know, it was above my head. It was one of the most special memories and the best lifts that I'd ever hit in the lead up to this competition. And that for me was enough to qualify me for the 2016 after the rest of the competition played out. Now this is the crazy thing about Olympic weightlifting. Qualifying for the Olympics is so difficult as a British athlete, which meant that I put all of my eggs in my basket to try and qualify. My body was so beat up after this event, but yet we only had the Olympic Games in like 2 or 3 months' time. So we really had to try and hang on to the form and the energy in between those 3 points. But so proud, and it was an absolute epic comp. I want to go back and have a look at some of these lifts from a technical standpoint. Now, I'm going to look at Owen's too, so we can break down his technique. Absolutely incredible snatcher and an amazing weightlifter. So there's a lot of great things that we're going to see here in this video. So one thing you'll notice that Owen does really well when he works from the floor in the lift is he maintains a really nice consistent angle at the back. And also what I really like to see, which a lot of beginners struggle with, is his eye level looking up. This helps you lead with the chest in the first phase of the floor and maintain that really good position. You'll see how naturally his knees move out the way in the first phase of the lift, not by thought, but because he's in the correct start position. And by the time then he's reaching knee height with the bar, again, we have this lovely parallel line between the red and the green line at this point. Through into extension now. As Owen starts to open up, one thing I want you to notice is his shoulders get a little bit behind the bar. Now, when the shoulders get a little bit behind the bar at this point and we come onto the toes a little bit too early, this is what can cause the bar to start to loop when we come into extension, which is why you can see that bar tracking back into the overhead. Now, Owen's doing his best to try and hang on to it at this point, but with that bar looping, kind of puts him out of position in the catch. This is my first lift at the 148. Now, for me, key things that I'm thinking about when I'm moving from the floor is, like I said, making sure that my chest is the leading point. I get into a really good position here where I've maintained flat feet with my shoulders above the bar and bending the knee. This was something that I'd always been working on in the build up to this competition, so that when I extended, I striked up a lot straighter than I normally would do. I rely heavily on my mobility when I snatch, which is why when you'll see when I sit deep down into the bottom position, my bum's almost literally touching the floor, but the bar is maintaining a good position directly over the crown of my head in the catch position, which meant that although this looked like a lift that was on the upper limit, I managed to stabilize and stand up really well. Coming into Owen's second attempt, one thing that you'll notice that Owen does sometimes when he sets up is he rolls the bar in. This can sometimes cause an issue with the trajectory of the bar through the middle phase of the lift if you start too soon. So I much prefer the bar to be static at that point. But nonetheless, one thing that you'll notice that Owen does much better on this lift in comparison to his previous lift is that he stays on flat feet much better on that previous one, okay? The extension position is great, nice and straight there at the top. And then from here, as he comes down to his receiving position, there's almost too much height on the bar. He was so good through the middle, putting so much effort that now look at the height where he's already locked out in the overhead. He's almost in parallel position. But one thing that you'll notice is the feet haven't moved very wide. And when the feet don't move really wide, that can affect the stability and strength in the catch position, which is why he almost gets spat out in that catch. So the bars went over the back, he's had to jump forward as a result of that. And that, in my opinion, is probably one of the key reasons in this competition his coach said to him, go up or put more weight on the bar because of how easy it was through the extension. Now, Owen gets everything right on this at the final lift, which is the reason why it resulted in a beautiful 150 kilo snatch. But I think for him going into this, he probably would have been a little bit gutted because he's probably capable of snatching 155 to 158. So you'll see the flat feet here in comparison to that first lift that we looked under. Much better position with the shoulders above the bar through extension. Great extension position at the top. And of course, this resulted in a really nice solid catch position there. Much deeper you see now in the catch for this point and a lovely overhead position. Weight was a little bit back in his heels, but he stabilizes nicely and stands up. My second lift was the 152 attempt. Let's see what goes wrong on this one. Again, for me, pretty good off the floor, but you'll see what I'm doing early here is getting back behind the bar, which we've noticed is a flaw for a lot of people when they're snatching. Because like I said, through that extension, it will start to put the bar away from the body and the shoulders will be way too far back. Sometimes you can get away with this and land the lift, but on this particular one for me, wasn't quite good enough. And again, from that deep position, the bar ends up coming down and crushing me. There's no way I'm going to save it from that point. Now, I didn't want to go up any heavier at this point because I just need to get 152 in to stay ahead or stay in tie. No, to stay ahead by 2 kilos on Owen at this given point. Now, technically for me, this is probably one of the best lifts that I did on the day. You'll see this lovely midway position here where my shoulders again above the bar. The bar is staying close through this middle phase of the lift, which is extremely important for us to maximally utilize the legs through this middle phase. A lot of people get confused when you see a top lifter lift and they think that the bar's hitting at the hip crease, whereas what we're actually trying to do is create vertical force with the bar through the middle phase of the lift, which is why the closer you can keep it through the middle phase and get the bar to fire out the hip crease so it moves vertically through this point is super crucial. This then meant that when I come into my receiving position, although I was on my upper limit in terms of what I could achieve at this point, I'm nice and deep and I managed to hold onto the bar. You'll notice here I'm letting my wrist sit back in the catch position. This really helps me achieve a really solid lockout position. And again, like I said, I really lean into the fact that I have good lower body mobility to be able to get deep in the bottom position as possible. This is extremely important to have good mobility because ultimately what this allows, if you look at the height on which I receive the bar, so I'll draw a line on here, versus the height that I pull the bar to after extension, you see how those lines are pretty much bang on. After the point where I finish my extension, the bar will keep going up as I transition into my catch position. This is what ultimately gives you the time then to get down into the receiving position. But again, right on the upper limit. Let's move on to the clean and jerk. So from here, key things that I'm thinking about when I'm setting up in this position is keeping my knees and arms in line in the setup so that I can use the legs well in the first phase of the lift. This keeps the bar tracking over the midfoot in that first phase. It's super important that we keep the bar over midfoot in the first phase from the floor, especially when you're working with the heavy load, because that will increase the likelihood of you getting pulled out of position when we initiate from the floor. So watch how my head moves from this point. I'm just gonna draw a line on here on my face line. All right, you'll see that as I initiate, very minimal movement forward in the first phase. This means that my legs are doing the work. And this is the thought process that I think through, I guess, getting to above the knee when I'm doing a clean, is keeping the shoulders above the bar, the arms as relaxed as possible, so that when I transition into this point, you'll see again that nice position where the shoulders are stayed straight above the bar is still over midfoot, which is great because it means I'm going to maximally be able to utilize the legs through the extension, and I get nice and tall here. Now naturally when we're doing a clean, we don't need to pull the bar as high because the catch position is much lower. So you'll see that point again from there to bar reaching maximum height to then my point in which I receive is back on that initial line here, which is what we're looking for. You'll then normally see the same distance between maximum height and extension line and receive height to the lowest point, which if we take into account the bar whip here, is pretty even between these three lines. That shows good efficiency in the clean. From there, I stand straight up on that first bounce. It's really important to stand straight up on the first bounce where possible because you save a lot of energy then going into the jerk. What I will always do is as I stand up, I reset the hands and then I reset the feet. This allows me to achieve the bar back in my full grip when I'm setting up for the jerk, and having those feet and shoulder width apart ensures that throughout the dip and drive, I'm maximally utilizing my legs. Now the things that I'm looking for here at this point when I'm driving is that I've risen up onto the heels, which I'm just about doing, but most importantly, the bar is still in contact with the shoulders while I'm doing this. This means that I'm able to utilize the legs as best as possible to the overhead position. Now, in the split, what we're looking for here is the bar is staying stacked over the major joints and it's splitting the back knee, which it is. I'm keeping the heel up off the floor to allow that back knee to stay bent here as my base of support. The shin needs to stay as vertical as possible here at this point to ensure that it's easy for us to recover front foot, then back foot, which I do really well in the recovery of this. So it's a good opening lift. We're going to fast forward now to Owen's last lift and to my last lift here. So again, you'll see the slight dynamic start come into play here for Owen, where he rolls the bar in, but what you'll see is that helps him, and this is maybe one of the key reasons why he does this, keep the bar nice and close and up again over the midfoot in this first phase. What you'll notice that Owen does is slightly different to me when he cleans is he has slightly more arm bend happening here. The bar then comes up from a much higher position when he cleans, which again, I think that affects consistency in the receive position for the clean, which may be something that was one of the causes why he wasn't as consistent on this given day with some of his lifts. But nonetheless, the good thing about Owen is he was so strong in his legs, that nonetheless, he's always going to stand up at that bottom position, which is great. Owen shuffles his feet in as well, lets the bar settle, and then something that's really important when we're working with heavier weights on the clean is that we time the dip right. So what I mean by timing the dip is ensuring that throughout the dip, the momentum the bar is coming down all the way through into the drive. Again, this allows you to use the momentum of the bar to get the height on it when we're moving into the split. Owen's jerk position is absolutely exceptional at this point. You'll notice here how the bar, again, is splitting through that back leg. There's great balance 50-50 between the front and the back foot here, which is exactly what you want, which means that from a recovery standpoint, it makes it much easier to push back that front leg. He stabilizes really well, and of course, like I said, a 13 kilo PB for him. So let's look at the final lift, the one that took the gravy. Again, you'll see a lot of similarities from that first lift run, holding stability and maintaining that good angle of the back all the way through to mid-thigh. I've kept on flat feet, which again was something that I'd worked on hard through this middle phase. Exercises that I was doing a lot of in training when I was practicing getting good for the clean and jerk for this competition was doing heavy pulls from blocks and cleans from blocks. This helps you stay patient through this middle phase of the lift and not come onto the toes too early. Now you'll notice with this being a submaximal clean, the height in which I caught the bar was a little bit lower. This threw me off a little bit, but meant that I had to take the second bounce to stand up out the bottom position. Now that actually allowed me to use the whip on the bar to help me get through that sticking point. Now, at this point, obviously I was panicking, the weight was super heavy on my shoulders. So what I did is I'd take 3 breaths before I go for the jerk. By taking the 3 breaths there, it allows the bar to settle, allows me to get my oxygen back in for the jerk. I maintain a good upright torso position here through the dip. Whenever I think about how deep you should be dipping, we're dipping to the point where the knee is just above the toe at this point, because that allows you to keep the torso nice and upright through the drive. Now from here, I let the legs do the work for as long as possible. I've driven the bar slightly out in front. So when you look at this in comparison to the other one, you'll see how my hips have gone a little bit far back here and the bar is out in front of my head, which is less than ideal. Fortunately though, and this is one of the best things about doing split jerk versus any other jerk, is it gives you that margin for error. So you can see how I pop my head through there to recover the lift and just about get my feet back in line to be able to save it. An absolute epic day in the office. One of the most enjoyable competitions that I've ever had. And you can see the standard at these competitions when people are going for Olympic trial qualification. The margin for error is so minimal. But for both myself and Owen leading into this competition, we've done years and years of practice, so many different training blocks to ingrain the good movement pattern to be able to compete.